Ever seen a motocross suspension on a golf cart? I'm going to show you one today. Alright guys, so here's my cart all broken down so you can see the suspension. We're going to come back to the back and I'll show you how I did the back, and I'll show you the front real quick just so you can, for you guys that might not have seen the cart before. But basically I have a TRX 450 R A-arms on the front, suspension on the front. And the good thing about doing, using something that's already been done before, especially for racing four-wheelers who jump a lot, it's already been engineered. All these A-arms and stuff have already been engineered to take a beating. So that's why I kind of picked a set that's already been tested and tried and engineered instead of trying to build the A-arm thing myself. So let's go back here to the back and we'll start back here. And I'll walk you through. A typical golf cart's going to have leaf springs on it back here, where your leaf springs go under the axle, and you really don't have a whole lot of movement of your axle, so it begins to get a rough ride. So this system is a 4-link system. There's a bar that runs underneath the cart all the way up underneath there to the front. That's your bottom link, and then your top links go in triangular to the front. Now a lot of 4-link systems, the top link is actually reversed, but you can't do that on a golf cart because your motor is right here. My motor's away getting fixed right now. That's why it's gone. I burnt some brush wires up on the motor doing stuff I shouldn't be doing with it. So, but the top link is reversed on a golf cart, which I don't really think it matters. So on this type of ride. So that is where the freedom of movement comes from. And everything on this axle rides on these shocks. So you get a lot of freedom of movement in the back that rides on those shocks right there. So really cool setup for a golf cart. And I'm just going to show you real quick a couple of things you need to think about. So this is a club car in 1982. And the frames here go to a V in the front, in the very front of the cart. So the whole frame system tilts towards a V, towards the front. So you've got a shock right here that you've got to get mounted straight on the outside of this frame. And I wanted it on the outside to give it more stability versus trying to figure out a way to put it on the inside. But if you go to the outside of this frame and to keep the shock straight as possible, you've got to weld a shock mount down here as close to the end of the axle as possible. So, and to do that, you've got to put 2-inch axle extenders on your axle. And let me jump over here real quick and I'll show you how this looks over here. Look how easy that came off. So yeah, that's your 2-inch axle extender right there. And you've got to have that to get your tire away from your shock, to give you some space there. Otherwise you can't put your shock mount down there next to your drum brake. So, and then these shock mounts are just simple, angle iron that I built, and they basically, I got a little brace across here, but there's 2 bolts right there. They go through the frame that pinch this angle iron up against the frame through here. You can see the bolts right there. And they pinch that. And this is a 4.5 from here to here is 4.5 inches. And then my shock mount is just mounted right there. So perfect alignment to what you need for this rear axle to get your shock as far out on your axle as possible. So that's it on the shocks. Oh, and by the way, these shocks these shocks are Polaris Sportsman 700s. That's what they're off of. And you can find these all day long on eBay. So those are Polaris Sportsman 700 shocks. So, and they're a little bit stiff on this cart, guys, just a little bit, which I like, but they are a little bit stiff. So if you find yourself not needing as much weight carrying capability as I do with bags of corn and all that on the back of this, you might want to go down to something like 500 Sportsman 500 shocks, or you can go to adjustable shocks and all that. It just depends on how much money you want to spend on shocks. You can spend thousands of dollars just on rear shocks alone, but these are all off eBay, dirt cheap. So all right, so let's talk about the top link and how it connects to the cart. Let me see if I can get my camera down in there for you. You see how that's connected? What I did to create that, let me see if I can get my light down here so you can see. These are ball joints. These are 3/4 inch ball joints that are welded to a bung, which is the ends of these where the ball joint screws into is called a bung. And you weld this inside the pipe here all the way around. This is DOM piping. It's I think it's 1.5 inches, but it's 1/4 inch thick on the inside. It's probably heavier than I needed for this, but I just wanted to be safe. And what I did here is there's a piece of angle iron that's turned backwards right here. And it pretty much gives you a perfect angle to weld to here. And then if you can see, there's a piece of angle iron that goes across the top right here. See if you can see that. And it bolts right here to the frame, and it bolts over there to the frame. This up here is aluminum. So that angle iron right there bolts into the aluminum frame. And I wish I could have welded to it, but you can't. So you can't weld steel to aluminum, so you have to bracket everything on. So all this joint stuff here is welded to that one piece of angle iron, which then just simply bolts into your frame. So it's pretty simple. You just have to be able to fabricate that. So that's how that works. And then when you look back at these, mounts back here, the shock mount is just a basic shock mount, tabs where you mount your shocks. And then these things, these are your ball joint tabs right here. And these come in two forms. These come in a curved base for welding on axles, and they also come in a flat base, which I used on the front to connect the bottom links to the front bracket. So I used the curved mounts, just welded them, and it worked out perfect. 3/4 inch bolt going through a 3/4 inch ball joint with 3/4 inch spacers on each side. And same thing down here on the bottom. I just welded my joints, my ball joint tabs up next to where my old leaf spring support used to be right here on both sides, and put my ball joint in between there. So this is your old mount right there where your leaf springs used to sit, and bracket to it. So that's pretty much how you put a 4-link system onto a golf cart axle. And it actually works out really good. I mean, I'm really surprised, really happy with the way this whole thing turned out. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I just want to show you what the front brackets look like so that you can see how to build these yourself. Now, this is important because you've got to be able to have some strength up here to connect your front bottom link right here. So what I did is I measured from here over to here and created a bracket that goes across, and there's a screw on the outside of this rubber. This pops off, and I drilled a hole through this nice thick aluminum and put a bolt through here that brackets into that brace, and then I drilled through the frame here and then bracketed over there. So this has to be exact width, and then you weld your flat tabs onto that and bracket your ball joint. So Some guys like more of a triangular pivot on their lower link, where they would put these more towards the middle of the cart, and it gives you more of a pivot on your rear end. I didn't need that or want that, so I just put them straight in line with where they go to the axle back there. So that kind of gives you a view from underneath up here. So that's pretty much it. That's how you connect your your bottom link to your axles and run them back there. This same thing. This is 1.5 inch DOM piping, and it connects right back there to the rear axle. So that's the rear end, guys. So now let's go to the front axle. All right, so let's move up to the front end, and we'll discuss how all this comes together. And let's talk a little bit about why I picked a TRX 450R front end. And one of the main reasons is because these things have already been engineered by the industry to take a beating. These things are really strong, and it just makes sense to use something that's already been engineered. I thought about making my own A-arms and all that, then I just decided to take what was already on the market and just adapt it to a golf cart. And I want to walk you through how I did it. But simply put, if you can see the gap right in between here, and if I could take everything and just slide it right off of the front of this golf cart, there's only 2 I-beams that come out in the front of a club car, at least. Easy-goes are different, but there's just 2 beams that come to a V there that you have to work with. And everything on this, basically, there's a top bracket that sits up here, and that's where your shock mounts are. And then there's a bottom rectangle bracket that bolts underneath. And basically what you're doing is you're taking the top bracket and the bottom bracket, and you're pinching them together onto the frame. And they've got bolts that go down through the back, bolts that go through the front, and I think some bolts in the middle. I have a lot of bolts in there just to make sure. And it's all pinched down onto the frame, and that's what holds this whole system onto the front of this club car frame. So if I undid the bolts, took them out, I could slide this whole front end right off of this golf cart. And pretty simple concept. It's just a matter of fabricating it and making it all fit. That's the trick. And the steering on here gets a little tricky as well. But one thing I want to talk to you about real quick is that club car, these golf carts weren't made to jump ramps. And they weren't made for motocross, obviously. So there's not a whole lot of bracing. So all this bracing I ended up having to add to it. And what came with the cart was this little bracing right here. I had to add this, and I added that, and I added this big brace because my roll cage rides on this right here, which is then braced down to the side. So I got some good bracing on here, but what I had to do underneath here, just in case you're thinking about this, is that you have to do some bracing, or at least I did. Let me grab my light so you can see better. You have to do some bracing, or otherwise you're just not going to do yourself any justice on putting a system like this in the front of your cart if you don't brace it all right, because your suspension needs to absorb your ride. And so if you can see, right, I had to add this brace. There was no bracing here up to this. So these bars, I added some extra bracing in these bars, and then I added this brace here to keep the front end from torquing like that. And I added an extra brace in there and added some other bracing on the other side as well. So I added, you can see all the welds right here now, and there's a bracing right there, and that's my reservoir for my front brakes, and we'll get to that in a minute. And you can see the other side here of the setup. So you got to do some bracing, because these club cars, they're not made for putting these types of systems on the front, and the bracing is really just not there. So, but the problem is I can't weld aluminum. So I had to get a mobile welder to come out, and I had already cut and fabricated all the pieces, and I just had him weld everything for me real quick onto this before I ever mounted this front end system on here, just because needed some bracing just to make sure that, you know, things were going to hold up under this whole new system. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about what's nice about putting a front end on your cart like this. One of the nice things about it is that you get front brakes with it. And that's a beautiful thing, because brakes are not cheap on golf carts. Front brakes are not cheap on golf carts. And when you go to buy this setup, you're going to need, if you're buying the A-arms, you're going to need to buy the A-arms. You're going to need to buy the spindle that your hub slides onto, that connects to your ball joints, all that. And then you're going to need to buy a hub. So a lot of times you can buy the whole setup like I did. It comes with the A-arms, the spindle, and the hub. And otherwise you got to find things separate. Sometimes they're just selling the A-arms. Sometimes they're just selling the spindles. And if you buy them all, you know, separately, you can do that. But sometimes it's nice to buy the whole set. Just be careful on eBay. Some of these guys jump, they bend their A-arms and then they put new A-arms on, and they sell their bent ones on eBay. So you just need to make sure you're not buying bent A-arms. The other reason guys upgrade their A-arms is they go to a longer travel A-arm, a higher upgrade, and then they'll put these on eBay and sell them. There's nothing wrong with them, because they're going to they're upgrading their A-arm systems on racing four-wheelers. So so you can get the whole setup like this. Now the other trick is that these hubs are made for golf cart, ATV wheels. They're not made to fit golf cart tires, because golf cart tires just don't fit the hub size of that ATV hub right there. So if you notice in these big 4 holes here are for your normal golf cart hub. These little holes right here are for the new 4-wheeler hub, ATV hub, this hub. So you have to, first thing you got to do is take your hub and center it perfectly, and you can do it, and then pick your hole, drill your holes, and then center it out, drill it out, and then mount your tire on. So it's not really that hard. It's the key to getting it right is patience, and making sure you get it centered. Otherwise you'll be riding on a wobbly tire. I nailed mine perfectly. Maybe they're not perfect, I just don't notice it, because I'm always riding in rough terrain anyway, so it's not like I'm doing 70 down the interstate. So that's easy enough to do right there. So these shocks on this cart are Fox Podium Shocks. They're really nice because they're adjustable. So you screw these down to adjust the amount of pressure down here that you need. And you can buy these all day long on eBay used. So that works out really nice. And the other thing is that I'm just going to kind of go through and try to give you some close-ups underneath here of kind of how this all works. You can kind of see there. So this is nothing but a rectangular piece of angle iron that just sits on top of the frame. I-beams come to a point right here, and then there's the bottom bracket right there. Let me see if you can see it better if I get the light on it right. And then I just created my A-arm brackets, and it mounts up underneath there. So if you go right there is my steering rack and pinion. Now, see that round hole? That was the toughest thing I think of this whole project, was deciding to cut a 2-inch hole through my frame. And that was a little nerve-wracking. But you can get away with it because the bracket sits on top of that. Let me get on this side over here. The bracket that you can see up here, let me see if I can get my light to hold for me. This bracket comes so far back here and it's bolted through that it pinches enough that there's no stress in this area right here for that to crack. So, so it worked out fine. I've put this thing through so much testing so far. It would have cracked by now if it was a problem. So we're all good there. But that rack and pinion, that is a 11-inch rack and pinion that sits down in that little hole right there, which is like a tight little spot. You might be able to see it down in there. It's mounted right down there in the middle, and it goes out both sides of the setup. So, and it's an 11-inch, and it sticks out perfectly. Matches the A-arms with this width, and you can see where it sticks out right up there for the steering. It's on the same angle as the A-arms, and seems to work out nice. So so that's pretty much it there. And you know, it's just a matter of rigging it all together. You can see down in here I have this bolted right there. Let me see if I can grab my light so you can see those. There's bolts down in there that pinch the upper and the bottom together. Now, let me share with you a couple things about the braking system on here, and then I'm going to go into showing you how I connected the brakes to the cart. Now, that's a brake reservoir that you see right there. So that runs to the master cylinder underneath the cart. So let me run over that with you real quick. Now, these hoses for your hydraulics, for your brake fluid, these you can buy off eBay as well, that fit our 450s, and you have to run it and then mount it there. Now let me get under there and show you what that looks like so that you can see how I connected that underneath. So let me get up underneath here. All right, so you've got your lines right here, brake lines, and there's a T joint right here, and then this runs to the top part runs to your master cylinder, and the other side goes to your other brakes over there. So it's mounted here on the back side of this bottom bracket, and then it runs to your master cylinder right there. So my master cylinder is mounted right there because it has to tie in to your brake lever right there. So as I move, that's my not moving much now, but you can see normally this is your braking system. So this bar right here turns, and you have to be able to mount that master cylinder lever to your braking system. So you can see that little tab, steel tab right there with all those holes in it. That's a fabricated piece that I built, and I welded it to this bar. And it's got all these holes in it to adjust how much movement you want on this arm based on the amount of brake press that you're giving it. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but definitely doable if you leave yourself some adjustment rooms with those holes. So I got it nailed now, it's perfect. So just a simple motorcycle rear master cylinder that you can get on eBay all day long. I think they're around 12 bucks, even 15 bucks, something like that. Nothing special, and just runs and comes in here and presses your fluid into both directions to your A-arms, to your brakes. So if you're going to put front brakes and A-arms on it, you got to tie your brakes into your current brake bar that is controlled by your brake lever that goes up and out to your cart for your foot. So so that's pretty much it on that part. All right, guys, there you go. A motocross suspension on a golf cart. Although it's a motocross suspension, you will not catch me jumping any ramps on it because I have a feeling those batteries would go flying. I was just looking for a better ride, and the ride that I got out of my stock suspension was unbearable, cutting across fields and through the woods. And now I don't even think twice about doing that because this suspension absorbs a lot of bumps that would normally go to my butt. So now it's much smoother. So anyway, you guys had asked for it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know a lot of you guys are in the midst of building carts and you're thinking about doing these types of things. So look for the rolling pictures at the end of the brackets and the build. Hopefully that will be helpful to you as well. And if I can help you with any questions or any process of how to do things, I'm more than happy to do that. Leave me comments, email me, and we'll connect around that, and I'll be glad to help you. So anyway, you guys have a great week. God bless you. Love you guys, man. Keep tuning in. We got a lot of good stuff coming, and we'll see you at the next video.